Hi, I'm Devin Skillian here on Local 4 Plus. We're going to take you to the Detroit Economic Club. We're going to hear from former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney as we near the presidential election. She's talking with Jonathan Karl. Jonathan is the chief Washington correspondent for ABC News. Let's take you there now.
It's my pleasure to introduce today's guests. I don't want to tell you how long I've known both of them, though I probably am going to end up doing it. I'm seasoned. I'm not old. But when I married John Dingell, yes, count back to when that was, Liz and her sister and her parents lived in the same complex that John and I did, and we were neighbors. And Liz went to school with John's daughters. So we go back that far. And her mother, okay, in those days, like maybe one or two of you remember I was once a Republican, but I married John Dingell, kind of hard. Not hard, it was the greatest thing that happened in my life. But her mother helped me become a congressional spouse, and our friendship goes back that long. She has served as a U.S. Representative for Wyoming's at-large congressional district from 2017 to 2023. She chaired the House Republican Conference, the third highest position in the House Republican leadership, from 2019 to 2021. And served as vice chair of the Select Committee investigating the January 6th insurrection. And I also want to tell you, one of my most entrenched memories from January 6th was all of us were together in the Congress, Republicans and Democrats at our undisclosed location, which may not have been so undisclosed, but, and Liz Cheney got up and kept us calm and said, we will go back. None of us really knew what was happening at that moment. We will go back and we will certify the election results. And we went back at 2 or 3 in the morning and certified the election results. And I will never forget the leadership of Liz Cheney on January 6th. She is the author of the best-selling memoir, Oath and Honor, a memoir and a warning, which tells her firsthand account of the moment our democracy threatened to unravel and the story of the brave men and women who sought to save it. Now, I've known Jonathan Karl a long time, too. I don't go back quite that long, but he is one of the savviest guys I know in the media. He is currently the ABC News chief Washington correspondent and co-anchor of This Week with George Stephanopoulos. The former president of the White House Correspondents Association, Karl served as ABC's chief White House correspondent from 2012 to 2021. He is the author of 2 New York Times bestsellers on the Trump White House, Front Row at the Trump Show and Betrayal, the final act of the Trump Show. Please give a warm Detroit Economic Club welcome to Liz Cheney and Jonathan Karl.
All right. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Debbie Dingell, who I have known at least a couple decades. And thanks to Steve for welcoming us here. I understand you guys had a speaker here a couple weeks ago. Look, Congresswoman, I just wanted to start with you. You just had an extraordinary day yesterday. You were in Pennsylvania, here in Michigan, in Wisconsin with Kamala Harris. And I've known you for a long time. And I truly never thought I would see you running around with a Democratic presidential nominee throughout the battleground states. But I want to start, what was your sense of her? Because you didn't really know her before all of this. So you've spent some real quality time with Kamala Harris. What's your sense of her?
Well, let me say, first of all, wonderful to be here in Detroit. Thank you so much to my dear friend Debbie and to Steve and to John. And it is true that it was a remarkable day yesterday. I have had the chance to spend time with Vice President Harris to talk to her about the challenges and the threats that our country is facing. And to take a measure of who she is as a person. Now, I'm sorry to say I've also spent time with Donald Trump. And, you know, there's a real difference between a candidate, someone who was president, someone who we all watched. We know that he watched the attack on the Capitol on television and refused to tell the mob to go home for over 3 hours. And when you think about that cruelty, and it's not the only example of the cruelty. What we've seen him do in the aftermath of the terrible hurricanes we've just had, lying to people about aid and assistance, it's cruelty. And when I had to make a decision about this race, I could have, and obviously was never, after January 6th, was never going to be in a position where I was supporting Donald Trump. I believe he's unfit and he's dangerous. But I made the decision beyond that to endorse Vice President Harris. And it is certainly the case that there are policies on which we disagree. But she is somebody who's devoted her life to public service. She is somebody who, even if you disagree with her, and maybe especially if you disagree with her, I can tell you she will listen. You know, when you all in business, when you think about what are you looking for in somebody you hire, you're looking for somebody that you can trust. You're looking for somebody who's going to be responsible, who's going to operate in good faith. You certainly wouldn't hire somebody who was unstable and erratic. And we need to think about this election in those terms. We're hiring somebody for the most important job really in the whole world. And I know that Vice President Harris is absolutely committed to governing in a way that reflects this coalition that has come together to support her. We've never seen anything like the coalition. I mean, it's, as you know, probably it stretches from Taylor Swift to Dick Cheney. And it's a broad coalition, but it is.
And you like both of them, Taylor Swift,
you know what?
And Dick Cheney.
I actually love both of them. But it's, you know, we face huge challenges, and we need somebody serious to deal with those challenges. So for me, it was not a tough decision. And at the end of the day, as a conservative, as somebody who's worked all over the world, worked in places where people aren't free, somebody who understands the value, the incredible value, the miracle of this system that we have in this country, there's only one choice. There's only one candidate, in my view, in this race that we can say we'll count on them to uphold the rule of law, and that's Vice President Harris.
Okay, so it's not at all surprising that you are not supporting Trump. I had an interview with you the day that the Republicans voted you out of leadership in the House.
Thanks
because
for
of
reminding me of that. Appreciate
yes.
that.
Yes. And you said to me, I remember vividly, you said, I said, what now? And you said, well, I'm going to do everything that I can do to ensure that Donald Trump is not the Republican presidential nominee, and if he becomes the presidential nominee, to keep him from ever getting near the White House again. Well, he got through the first hurdle. I want to get to him, but Harris is somebody who a lot of Republicans who share your concerns about Trump have said things very similar to what you have said over the past 3.5 years. Will say, she's too far left, I can't support her. Some of those people have come around to supporting Trump. Some are simply saying they're going to write somebody else in.
And some,
yeah,
and I think many more than will say so publicly, will vote for Vice President Harris. When you're facing the situation that we're in today, and the vitriol of our political system, and look, I mean, we could talk for hours about what's happened to the Republican Party and why more elected Republicans won't stand up and speak out. But the numbers of people who served with President Trump, who say never again, senior military officials and national security officials, his chief of staff, people who knew him best, Secretary of Defense, When they're telling all of us, never again, we need to listen. And I also just think it's important to recognize that there are many, many Republicans who will cast a vote for her, who may not be up there saying so publicly right now, but who will do the right thing when it comes to it.
But what is your sense of Harris? Obviously took a series of positions when she was preparing to run for president in 2020 in a Democratic primary. Clearly felt that the way to compete in that primary was to be very progressive, get to the left maybe even of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, all of that. Was that the real Kamala Harris, or is she? I mean, what is her? What does she stand for? What's your sense? You spent real quality time with her.
Yeah, I mean,
is she the progressive who tried to get way to the left in 2019, or is she the person that we saw at the Democratic convention?
What I can tell you is, and again, I'm not suggesting that she's a Reagan Republican.
Right.
You know, we have differences. There's no question. But if you listen to what she's saying, if you look at the extent to which both publicly and privately, she's absolutely committed to, for example, America's leadership role in the world, to the extent to which the United States of America isn't going to have economic security or freedom or national security if we don't lead. You know, if you look at the speech that she gave at the Democratic convention, it was far more Reagan-esque, far more moderate than the speech that Donald Trump gave. And when it comes to the challenges that we face today, I think certainly her views have been informed by her time as vice president. And that's, you know, that's no small thing. I hear people sometimes, I hear men, frankly. I heard John Bolton, I'll just be direct. I heard John Bolton the other day say, oh, she's not qualified. Now think about it. Look, he can say he's not going to vote for her. He could say he disagrees with her. But there is no man who was district attorney, attorney general of the state of California, United States senator, vice president of the United States, that people would say they're not qualified. And I think that's...
But
so
how many club
I
championships has she won in golf?
She doesn't cheat at golf. So I would just ask people, this, especially in a place like Michigan, look at the policies, look at the substance. I mean, you know, Donald Trump likes to portray himself as some kind of, you know, expert businessman, and he came here to Detroit and he trashed the hell out of Detroit. He seems to be completely unaware, you know, that Detroit has an investment grade bond rating now for the first time in years. He's completely unaware of the renaissance that Detroit is experiencing. And totally, I've had the chance to spend some time with Mayor Duggan and to talk to him about what's happening here in Detroit and the energy, the excitement around this city and this community. And those are the kinds of things that we need leaders, we need people who are elected who are paying attention. Donald Trump is completely focused on being cruel. And the other thing that I would ask, especially the business community, to remember, our entire economy is based upon the rule of law. It's based upon being able to count on stability, being able to count on an investment climate that is undergirded by the rule of law. Donald Trump is at war with the rule of law. And his erratic nature, the extent to which you can't count on what he's going to do at all from one day to the next, and you can't count on anything that he says now. But if you wouldn't hire somebody, if you wouldn't trust somebody to invest with them, then you can't make him president of the United States. It matters too much, and that's what's on the line this November.
So just because we're at the Detroit Economic Club, when he talks about the economy, he portrays this image that things were all fantastic when he was president. I mean, I think he kind of forgets the shutdown of 2020, but that everything was wonderful, and then all hell broke loose when the Democrats came in, and he's a better steward of the economy.
Yeah.
And the polling is largely shown. I mean, it seems to be shifting a little bit very recently, but that voters generally, even voters that are not voting for him, have more confidence in Donald Trump than Kamala Harris on the economy.
Well, I think, we've seen recent polling.
Yes, recent polling has moved a little bit, yes.
And that's a big thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, we always see in every election, there's a big difference between sort of when people are talking about theoretically how they're going to vote, and then when the voting starts, when you get down to it. And there are a lot of things, I think, that are making people really uncomfortable about the economic policies and proposals that he's put forward. I mean, you've got the Wall Street Journal, which has certainly not been a fan of the Democrats, but the Wall Street Journal making clear from having surveyed economists that his economic plans are going to increase inflation more than Vice President Harris's are. His economic plans are going to add to the debt far more than Vice President Harris's will. And I ask people to just think about one point. Donald Trump is now proposing massive across-the-board tariffs. And while you can say, look, I disagree with, a candidate's tax policies, you know that in order to implement tax policy, a president has to get that through Congress. They can't implement it unilaterally. Tariffs are different. A president can do that unilaterally with executive authority. And
as he did.
Right. And so when you hear him talk now about a much more expansive, he says it's the most beautiful word that there is, and he's going to be a tariff president, and he's going to impose tariffs of 100%, 200%. Think about the fact that he will be able to do that completely unilaterally, and you all know the impact that will have. The idea that that's not going to result in costs being passed on to consumers. And more broadly, we know what those kinds of massive tariffs did in terms of the Great Depression and adding to the Great Depression. So I think partly why you're seeing the polls start to shift is because people are digging in, and they're looking at what he's proposing, and they're looking at his track record. And at the end of the day, the worst thing for the economy of the United States of America is to have a president who won't respect the rule of law, a president who talks about deploying the military to go after the enemy within, a president who will create an America that has abandoned fundamentally our adherence to the Constitution. And you can't delink those two things.
So when you talk about what happened on January 6th, and really importantly, the weeks that led up to January 6th, and the efforts to overturn that presidential election, what do you say, especially to fellow Republicans who, again, expressed many of the same concerns that you've expressed, who say, look, that's the past, we've got to stop talking about January 6th, this is focused on the future, the policies of the, of these two candidates. What do you say to that argument that too much, enough about January 6th already?
It's interesting.
What do you say to those people?
I don't know who you're talking about, John. But it's interesting, if you look at the moments, the days and the weeks really right after January 6th, I think there actually was a moment when the Republican Party could have taken that approach. Yeah. Everyone in the party and leadership, elected in the House, almost everybody, said that that's it, said this can never happen again, we have to reject what happened, violence can't be part of our political process. So there was
Kevin
a moment,
McCarthy said that.
Yeah, even Kevin McCarthy. There was a moment when we could have done that and said this isn't who we are as a party and we have to move forward. But for a whole range of reasons, that's not the decision that people like Kevin McCarthy made. they decided instead, and in Kevin's case, it was because large corporations around the country announced they wouldn't be giving money to Republicans in the aftermath of the attack on the Capitol. And Kevin had to get access to funds. That was sort of what kept him in leadership. And so he decided to go down and see Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, mostly to get access to his small dollar donor lists. But that really brought Donald Trump back into the fold. And so, we're in a situation today where the question facing us is, are we going to take that risk again? And I think that what I find is usually the people who say, well, we don't want to talk about January 6th, are elected Republicans who have to rationalize that. Because if they face the truth about the attack, then you can't justify continuing to support Donald Trump.
And I should say that there are those who say they don't want to, stop talking about it, stop focusing on it. And there are those who have totally rewritten the history of what happened on January 6th. So I want to bring to you a moment, obviously one of the searing images of that day was the group of Trump supporters who were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence."
Yeah.
Hang Mike Pence, coupled with the fact that there was actually a gallows on the east side of the Capitol. So you had that going on. You had what you described earlier, which is Donald Trump doing nothing for several hours inside the White House.
And people pleading with him. I mean,
Yes.
Very human element of people pleading with him.
Members of his family.
Right, to tell the mob to leave, and he wouldn't do it.
But less than 2 months later, I sat down for an interview with Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. He'd left the White House. And I asked him about Mike Pence in that moment and the danger that Mike Pence was under. And by the way, thanks to the January 6th committee, we learned just how close the mob came to actually Mike Pence and how much danger he actually was in. But I want to play, if we can, I think that we have an ability to play video back here. I want to play you exactly what Trump said when I asked him about this moment.
Were you worried about him during that siege? Were you worried about his safety?
No, I thought he was well protected, and I had heard that he was in good shape. Mm-hmm. No, because I had heard he was in very good shape. But no.
You heard those chants. That was terrible. I mean,
he could have. Well, the people were very angry.
They're saying, "Hang Mike
Because
Pence."
it's common sense, John. It's common sense that you're supposed to protect. How can you, if you know a vote is fraudulent, right? Yeah. How can you pass on a fraudulent vote to Congress?
So I wanted to play the whole thing, just to make it very clear, nothing is taken out of context. That was then the former President of the United States effectively explaining and justifying the chance of his supporters who wanted to murder his vice president.
Right.
How after...
Yeah. I mean, and yes. And if you look at, what we've learned since, for example, in the most recent Jack Smith filing, that when a very senior official in the White House was told, somebody called and said, listen, they had to evacuate the vice president because his life was at risk. This senior official testified under oath that he thought, okay, maybe this will convince Donald Trump to tell the mob to leave the Capitol. And so he described rushing to the dining room off the Oval Office where Trump was sitting and telling him, saying, Mr. President, they've had to evacuate the vice president. And Donald Trump looked up at him and said, so what? So what? The danger couldn't be more real. And we're not facing a situation where Donald Trump is hiding what he did, or hiding his intentions. He says it every day. He talks about how proud he is of it. And I think the other thing people have to realize is, our courts can't enforce their own rulings. They can't. And so if you have a president who won't, who will ignore the rulings of the courts, then very quickly, the rule of law starts to unravel. And we now have, which I think we're going to talk about, this ruling from the Supreme Court on immunity, which, I think the court got wrong, but Donald Trump now believes he will be absolutely immune for anything that he does if he's elected again. Absolutely immune from criminal prosecution. And again, I ask you, think about what that means for this country. And we have a better choice. We have an alternative. We have somebody who will be the kind of leader this country needs.
Well, let's touch on that immunity. So the Supreme Court wasn't quite absolute immunity, but that's certainly the way Donald Trump has interpreted the decision. But broad immunity for anything that can be tied to official acts. So what does it look like if you have that combined with the fact that Donald Trump, if he goes back into the White House, he will have basically been cleared? I mean, the first thing he'll do is fire the special counsel. There's no more Jack Smith. There's no more investigation. There's the Georgia case, but that's, who knows where that will go. He will basically have gotten away with everything. And so many of the people that you just mentioned, his former chiefs of staff, his former defense secretaries, who stood up to him in that moment, his White House counsel, won't be there.
Right. Yeah, and I think that because we've never faced a threat like this before, it can be hard sometimes to kind of wrap your head around the magnitude of this threat. But certainly the fact that, that I'm out there campaigning with Vice President Harris, that tells you something about how serious the situation is. And John's points about, one of the things that we learned very clearly in the Select Committee was that Donald Trump intended far worse. And he was stopped from some of his worst intentions by the people who were around him. And he was stopped by, Republicans in the states who wouldn't do what he wanted, by Mike Pence who wouldn't do what he wanted. But those people won't be there in a second Trump term. He'll hire people like General Mike Flynn, who in December of 2020 said that Donald Trump should deploy the military to seize voting machines and rerun the election.
Martial law, he said. Martial law.
Yeah. The people who stopped him before won't work for him, and he doesn't want them there. He'll promise pardons to anyone who objects to actions he's attempting to take. And our framers constructed a system, of checks and balances and separation of powers with the idea, the understanding that Congress would be a check on the president, and the courts would be a check on the president. But think about the Congress. Do you really believe that I'm going to hesitate to say any, but think about which Republicans you really think in Congress would stand up to Donald Trump. They certainly haven't so far, and they say repeatedly now, that they won't say that Joe Biden won the election, and they suggest that they won't honor the electoral votes next time around. And we've talked about the courts, and so a second Trump term. When you hear people sometimes say, "Well, we have guardrails that will stop him. We can take the risk." That's not true. The guardrails don't work against a president who is intent on undermining the republic. And he's demonstrated that that's what he wants to do.
So you had this whole series of hearings for the January 6th committee, and I covered all of them. Basically, not every witness you had, but the vast majority of witnesses were Republicans.
Yeah.
Republicans close to him or Republican leaders in the states. We just heard what he had to say about Mike Pence. We know that Mike Pence is not supporting him. You mentioned, John Kelly, Jim Mattis, Mark Esper, a whole series of people that worked for him. So why is it that Trump has the vast majority of Republicans who are supporting him now?
Well, I think you have to distinguish between elected Republicans.
Yeah, I'm talking about
And
voters.
voters.
I'm asking you about voters. Why are...
Yeah, I mean, there are several things I think that have gone on. One is that Donald Trump has very effectively lied to and betrayed millions of, honest and honorable and hardworking people across the country. And he's tapped into something that's real. People feel like Washington doesn't listen to them. He played on that very effectively. And his lies wouldn't have taken hold the way they have if elected Republicans who knew better weren't willing to help spread his lies, weren't willing to collaborate with him.
But weren't a lot of those Republicans just trying to follow where they thought the voters were? Kevin McCarthy said to me at one point in early January, after January 6th, I think it was like 3 or 4 days later, I have people back in my district who would storm the Capitol again. He didn't think this was a good thing, by the way, but he was really concerned about the way.
But I think the response to that should be lead, right? I mean, there was a moment where there was a meeting that Kevin McCarthy had with the freshman Republicans, the newly elected Republican members, before the impeachment vote. So everybody gets sworn in on January 3rd, the Capitol's attacked on the 6th, and the impeachment vote's on the 13th. So you have these new Republicans who have been in office, for 10 days, basically, and they have to make a decision about this impeachment vote. So he had a meeting with the Republicans, and leadership would have been, the right thing to do would have been to say, look, it doesn't matter what party this president belongs to. What he has done is impeachable. And, you must abide by your duty and your obligation to the Constitution. What he said was, hey, guys, if you vote to impeach Donald Trump, I won't be able to protect you. Now, moments like that one, and there are many of them, where elected Republicans refused to lead. Mitch McConnell refusing to vote to convict is another one. But leadership matters. And if for Republican elected officials to sort of stand back and say, gosh, you know what, I couldn't do the right thing. I couldn't hold the guy who tried to seize power, who sent a violent armed mob to the Capitol. I couldn't hold him accountable because he was a member of my party. The framers understood the threat and the danger of that. And if we don't elect people who are going to take their obligations seriously, regardless of party, then we can't keep our republic.
Okay, so we're going to get to questions in just a moment. I have one more I want to ask you before we do. Part of what's happened is disinformation has set in. People came to believe that the election was stolen. The numbers are actually pretty shocking, despite the fact you had all these court cases, you had all the investigations, you had Republican leaders in the states who said, no, we've investigated, we've looked at the election results, they're fine. But disinformation has sunk in. And now, looking to this election, Twitter is now called X, as you've probably heard.
Where?
The guy, the guy from Tesla, Elon Musk is. So Elon Musk has been out just in the last few days, saying a few things from his X account, which has a massive audience. First of all, saying that he doesn't trust voting machines.
Yeah. Because
they can be manipulated to. Now, by the way, voting machines, just so you all know, they're actually not voting machines. They're counting machines. People fill out a paper ballot, and it goes in, and the machine counts it. And if there is any issue with the machines, they can be recounted by hand, as Georgia did all 5 million ballots. So, anyway, so this was one of the wackier conspiracy theories that even most of the people very close to Trump were trying to get him not to talk about in 2020. It's not the machines. As Steve Bannon says, I'm not a machine guy. It's not the machines. Okay, but now you have Elon Musk, who is a smart and accomplished guy with a vast audience, saying he doesn't trust voting machines. And then he said something just the other day. He said there are more registered voters in Michigan than there are eligible citizens. That's not true, and it's not that hard to check. So how do you combat the misinformation now? I mean, there's a whole ecosystem for it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I would say a couple things. One is, Elon Musk, first of all, I was actually surprised, and it wasn't just voting machines generally. I think he actually went after Dominion voting machines.
I guess he's 100.
He may not be aware of, the $787 million.
Maybe he feels that's not very much money.
That's
so.
right. Just a drop in the bucket for Elon Musk. That's how much Fox News had to pay for defamation against Dominion. But I think that we are going to see more of this. I think it's really important for people to recognize, he's going to use X and the supporters of Donald Trump who are trying to push these lies. And that, by the way, includes foreign adversaries who are trying to push these lies. They will use X. So as the weeks and days now go on, as we get towards the election, X is going to become even more of a cesspool of disinformation. And people really need to understand that. There's a very clear plan and intention, both by Donald Trump supporters who are working around him, as well as by foreign countries, to use X to spread lies and falsehoods about our democracy. And it's so important to get information from local sources. There have been tremendous improvements since 2020 in terms of understanding what's going on at the local level, so that the news can get out and that the truth can get out. And I think that's going to be very important for people to be focused on and understand the intention to spread this disinformation.
All right, let's get to questions from the audience. I think Congresswoman Dingell is here to curate that.
Thank you. And by the way, a lot of people asked the last question you just asked. Mm-hmm. But there are also a number of people who asked, how can we get to a point where all Americans agree with the same set of basic facts?
Well, I mean, I think that that throughout our history, there have been disagreements about facts. What we're living through right now certainly reflects a much greater effort at spreading disinformation intentionally. And I think that, look, I really believe that the way to begin this process of healing our country is not to reward the people who have been spreading these falsehoods. If you think about, what Donald Trump has done in terms of the lies that he spread about the election, and, you all know here in Michigan that they're lies. We can go through, he knew they were lies. Everybody told him that they were lies. But, if he is successful, based on spreading those lies, he becomes a model for other elected officials, and we all know some of those who follow in his path and spread the lies. And so I think taking seriously our responsibility as voters to make sure we're not incentivizing that we're incentivizing serious elected officials, and to take seriously the decision about who the president is going to be. You can't just say, all right, I don't like what he did, but I'm going to vote for him because I like policy X or policy Y. I would just say, first of all, you don't know what his policy X or Y is going to be. You don't know. You can't trust him. And secondly, we haven't even really talked about internationally and the national security piece of all of this. But to have an American president who aligns himself with tyrants, who aligns himself with the world's most autocratic leaders, who praises them and who praises their cruelty, that is something that will very quickly be hugely damaging and destructive to us economically and from a national security perspective.
So I debated asking this, but 5 or 6 people have asked this question in some form, and I'm not going to use some of the adjectives that were used. But I also get asked this question all the time, and I don't know how to answer it, so I want your wisdom.
This is for John, right?
You can both answer it. Why do you think, like Donald Trump, still has millions of people that support him? How do you explain the broad appeal he has, despite the all well-documented negative aspects? What unites people in continuing to support him?
Yeah, I think it's many of the things we've been talking about. I think that, I certainly think that you have, and I don't want to criticize the Republican voters who are supporting him. I think that what I would ask is, please take a deep, hard look at what you're supporting. And I would also say that the elected Republicans who have pushed the lie. I mean, it shouldn't be surprising to anybody in business that if leaders don't stand up and do the right thing, then it creates a culture and a rewards structure and a reward system, and we've seen that in the Republican Party, to do the wrong thing. And that's what's happening. And then, you add the disinformation to that, and it's significant. We are a very divided nation, absolutely. But I also think people have to remember that there are far more elected officials. Debbie and I obviously were on different sides of a number of issues, but I don't know a member of Congress who generates more respect, who has done more for the people that she represents than Debbie Dingell. And I think that and let me also, by the way, say that that is true of Alyssa Slotkin. And those are the kinds of public servants who will do what's right. You can count on them. And, at a moment when the press wants to highlight and foreign adversaries want to take advantage of, and Donald Trump wants to divide us, we don't have to let that happen. We can't let it happen. And people who are going to go cast votes, especially places like Michigan, your vote matters so much to send a message across our country and to the whole world that we are united on the most important and fundamental issues, and we're not going to reward the people who are trying to tear this country down and who are trying to destroy our democracy. We're just not going to do it.
Can I just quickly ask about one of those Republicans who is supporting Trump? Nikki Haley on January 6th had searing words about not just what happened on January 6th, about Trump's role, and saying that we followed him down a path we should never have followed him. We must never let that happen again. She said some other things as she was running for president against him, equally, again, sounding a lot like stuff you've said. It looks like she's going to be out campaigning with him in this final stretch. She's obviously endorsed him. How do you explain that, and what does that mean for all those Nikki Haley voters, the voters that were voting for Nikki Haley even after she had no chance of winning the Republican primary as a protest against Trump?
Look, I think that many of those so-called Nikki Haley voters have already voted, and they voted for Harris. And I think that you see pretty consistently out there that this reflects people who have been Republicans for a long time in some cases, who rejected Donald Trump. And it's it's hard for me to keep track exactly where Nikki Haley is on the issue at any given moment. And she said many of the things that she said publicly, she said to me privately. But look, I think that group of people that identified themselves as Haley voters, I would be willing to bet most of them will be voting for Vice President Harris.
So Steve keeps me on time. Multiple people ask this question, but it's short. Would you serve in a Harris administration in a cabinet position?
I'm not thinking about it. I don't even think that it's appropriate to talk about it or think about it. And that's not what matters right now. What matters is that I know that she is actively committed to making sure that she has Republican voices. She's talked about that she's governing in a way that reflects the coalition that's supporting her. And I think that's what people really need to know as they think about going to vote.
Okay, now we're going to move to the lightning round. We're going to ask a lot of questions, answer them fast, but there's been a lot of discussion about Detroit the last couple of weeks. Describe Detroit in one word.
Energetic.
Carl, you can do that too.
He has to do it too, right?
Yeah, Carl, you're supposed to, you're not in this for free.
I'm going to say Lions.
Hey. A person other than a family member you would like to have lunch with.
Have to be alive or?
You can. Okay. I let us be creative.
You go first. I have to think about this one.
It's Bob Dylan.
Ooh, that's a good one. Oh, Taylor Swift.
Hey, that was. Last book you read.
I am in the middle of reading a book called Hitlerland, and it's about Americans who were in Germany as during the rise of the Third Reich.
Tim Alberta's excellent book on the religious right. Fantastic.
Your favorite song?
Another Michigan reference.
Yeah,
yes.
He is. Constituent. Your favorite song? Okay, you're in Detroit.
You go first.
Eyes of the World by the Grateful Dead. How about that?
Man. I mean, I'm
very cutting edge. I'm very.
Yeah. I mean, I have many. I have Taylor Swift on my brain, obviously. And Taylor Swift has a wonderful song about her grandmother, and it's called Marjorie. And it's about the lessons that her grandmother taught her. And I particularly like that song because my grandmother's name was Marjorie. So I went to see Taylor Swift in London this summer with my daughter, which is a big deal. And plus, I really like childless cat ladies, so I feel like it all comes together.
Okay, because Steve's keeping me on time. We're not going to go for 2 hours and 20 minutes before we get to Q&A. I didn't say that. The last question I'm going to ask you is advice to, and I hate this question. I told Steve I was going to save them, but Steve wouldn't let me. Advice to your 25-year-old self. I don't think Liz loves it either.
I have two. Be more careful when you drive your dad's car without permission. And for God's sake, don't ever support Donald Trump.
Yeah. Buy Bitcoin? No, that wasn't around. There's nothing more important than the time you spend with your family.
Thank you. We loved having you here. It's been a great day.
Liz and John, we are thrilled you chose to be here at the DEC with us. Thank you. Good luck with the rest of your tour. Keep up the great work. Debbie Dingell, you're so busy as well. We appreciate you gave us your time today and also your DEC support. Thank you, Debbie. Ladies and gentlemen, two things. I invite you to join me for a strolling lunch in the ballroom. And Number 2, tell your friends and colleagues to join the DEC. We're a bunch of really cool people. On time, every time. Insert your own reference here. Inference, I should say. This meeting of the Detroit Economic Club is now adjourned. Thank you.
We are bringing this to you as part of our partnership with the Detroit Economic Club. We'll hear from more big names in the next few weeks, and we'll have them for you here on Local 4 Plus. Thanks so much for watching.